Okay, hello and welcome all to this World Statistics Congress session on COVID-19 and household surveys. What have we learned and what does it mean for the future? I'm Francesca Perucci, Assistant Director of the UN Statistics Division, and I will moderate this session, which is organized by the Inter-Secretariat Working Group on Household Surveys. The Inter-Secretariat Working Group on Household Surveys was established by the UN Statistical Commission in 2015 and brings together both international organizations and countries with the objectives of improving coordination of our household surveys, developing innovative survey methodology, and advocating for the importance of household surveys. For those of you who are not familiar with it, the UN Statistical Commission is the UN intergovernmental body for statistics, which brings together the chief statisticians of member states from around the world. So it is the highest decision-making body for international statistical activities. So the work of the Inter-Secretariat Working Group really feeds directly into the deliberations and decision-making of national heads of statistics. So as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic have caused serious disruptions to statistical operations around the world. According to the Statistics Division and World Bank survey to national statistical offices, which has been conducted at regular intervals since May last year, surveys have been the statistical operation most often impacted by the disruptions generated by the pandemic since its start. According to that survey, as of May 2020, 96% of national statistical offices had partially or fully stopped face-to-face data collection. As of May this year, only 72% had to some extent resumed this type of data collection. But we've also observed how many, and perhaps most, national statistical offices around the globe have stepped up to this challenge. And they've quickly turned to alternative data sources and adopted new innovative approaches. So looking ahead, we want to reflect on how the experiences of this last year and the lessons that we learned can reshape national household survey programs. How can we establish sustainable household survey programs that are agile and resilient to future shocks and crises like COVID-19? Will COVID-19 be a catalyst for innovation in the field of household surveys? And what are the priority actions that we can undertake both as international community and in countries in the next decade for household surveys? The session today offers a great opportunity to reflect on these questions. We will hear both from experiences in countries and international agencies with the innovative approaches and their views on how household surveys should be best positioned in the next decade. So before we dive in, let me remind you that we have a very tight timeline, so I'll have to stop you if you go over time. We have 4 great panelists and 1 great discussant, so please keep your presentation to the allocated time. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Gero Carletto, Manager of the Data Production and Methods Unit and Manager of the Living Standard Measurement Study in the Development Data Group at the World Bank. Gero is also one of the 2 co-chairs of the Inter-Secretariat Working Group on Household Surveys. So Gero, over to you.
Thank you, Francesca. So as Francesca was saying, I will be presenting in my capacity as co-chair of the Inter-Secretariat Working Group. I just want to give you a brief introduction, a brief description of a paper that the Inter-Secretariat Working Group has been working on, titled Positioning Household Surveys in the Next Decade, which kind of lays a little bit the ground, a bit of a vision on what household surveys we expect it to look like or we hope to be looking like in the next decade. So you're all familiar, and I will be repeating a little bit of what Francesca already introduced. So you're all familiar with the fact that household surveys are critical both for research and to inform policy decisions. They are a fundamental component of national statistical systems. They provide over 1/3 of the 232 indicators, SDG indicators, cutting across 13 of the 17 goals. Increasingly, particularly with the emergence of new data sources, household surveys have been proven particularly useful as a way to train, validate, and ground truth alternative data sources in order to gain higher resolution and high frequency insight for monitoring, targeting, and evaluation of policies. So despite this importance, a criticism persists regarding what is the different dimensions in terms of availability, coverage, accuracy, timeliness, and policy relevance of household surveys. So particularly in developed countries, but now increasingly also in developing countries, of particular concern are the lower response rate. There are concerns about coordination failures of different survey initiatives and how to better coordinate. And this is all in the face of a crowded backdrop of competing data sources. Again, as I was saying before, in order to achieve the granularity, the high level, the high resolution, which is increasingly needed and demanded. With all that, as Francesca was mentioning, COVID-19 over the past year, the pandemic completely upended the survey landscape. So these are like some results from the survey that Francesca was mentioning before, where it's basically we see two things. One is that clearly the disruption was dramatic. Virtually all statistical offices stopped a face-to-face interview, and now with a gradual reopening. But also, as Francesca was mentioning, this has provided an opportunity for national statistical offices to innovate, to introduce new data sources and new modes of data collection, like phone surveys, use of web surveys, and use of social media. So what you can see from the graph also that as emerges from the survey, data sources like remote sensing and citizen-generated data, particularly in developing countries, has been quite slow in terms of uptake. So against this backdrop, we thought that as part of the Inter-Secretariat Working Group to put together a bit of let's call it a vision paper, a position paper, in order to identify technical priority areas and sketch out a required enabling environment for household survey to perform their foundational role, meet this new data demand, and so increase the policy and research impact over the next decade. So the paper is structured around the 4 pillars. So it's basically what the paper does. Give a set of suggestions, recommendations, priority areas around these 4 pillars. So one is in terms of increasing the relevance and use of household surveys for policy and research. Second pillar is around pushing an ambitious agenda on the adoption of innovative methods and tools. The third pillar is around investing in capacity, and when in capacity I mean here both in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of skills for the scale up in the use of new modes of data collection, which has been particularly telling during the COVID, as I was saying, how National Statistical Office has embraced these new modes. And finally, as a fourth pillar, is a way to add value to household surveys, how to improve the interoperability and the integration with the data sources. And here I'm referring particularly to the development of new methods, new tools that facilitate the greater interoperability. And all these four pillars are wrapped around a cross-cutting topic, which is about how we foster a stronger enabling environment in order to achieve this vision. So I'm not going to go through the individual items, but I just want to give you a bit of a flavor of what the paper contains or will contain. And by the way, in terms of timeline, so we expect to have it out at least for a broader consultation in the next 2-3 months. So one area, as I was saying, is about focusing on increasing the relevance and the use of household surveys. And here, one particular important area is a set of recommendation, a set of insights on boosting efforts to increase data access and use. A particular concern is data privacy consideration in distributing disseminating microdata, particularly important now with the emergence of georeference information, which are part of micro data sets. So in terms of the second area, so the adoption of innovative methods, we suggest a number of areas where we think there is a lot of potential for improvement. One is, for example, taking advantage of new and affordable technologies like sensors, like GPS, to scale up the use of direct measurement in order to reduce measurement error and in order to keep in check cost, like I mean, just to combine with imputation methods. So another area particularly of priority is more research on to gain a better understanding of non-response rate and attrition. And also another area that we identify in the paper is the use of more efficient sampling methods, particularly in the use of multiple frames to collect survey data. In terms of improving capacity for CAPI phone web survey, one area of kind of we identify as a priority is to scale up the development and use of paradata, which are like regularly collected, for example, in CAPI. In CAPI application for quality assurance purposes. This becomes particularly important now where supervision, in-person supervision becomes more difficult or continues to be more difficult. And it's also another area that we emphasize is the development of tools and protocols for phone and web surveys, which is, again, particularly important. We saw during COVID, it was one of the constraints for national statistical offices to embrace this new technology. And there are a number of agencies that have been producing a number of useful resources that you can find both in the Inter-Secretariat Working Group website, but also in the individual agencies' websites. One paper which I would like to point out is a paper that we prepare as part of the Inter-Secretariat Working Group titled Planning and Implementing Household Surveys Under COVID-19, which again you will find on the Inter-Secretariat Working Group website. Apologies, I will be jumping through the last couple of slides so I can keep within my allotted time. And then one area which we feel particularly important in moving forward is how we add value to household surveys by improving the interoperability of microdata with other data sources. And this includes a number of ways, a number of means. One is something which is not necessarily new, is a more systematic inclusion of common questions, a kind of a thematic overlapping between different surveys and surveys and censuses for crosswalking and for survey to survey in imputation. Again, this is not something new, but it's something that we propose as a way to scale up and improve the relevance of survey data. Similarly, the same type of thematic overlap can be achieved across probability and non-probability sample. And just to give an example, how you link a household survey, a representative household survey with a data set collected through crowdsourcing or citizen-generated data, which is generally a non-probability sample, and then how you combine these two sources to improve on the accuracy and representativeness of the new source. As I was saying before, with the increase in georeferencing in household surveys, both in terms of household plots, community, clearly that opens a lot of opportunities in terms of using household surveys for validation and ground truthing, but also raises concerns about data privacy, as I was saying, and this is where this is part of the improving the tools and the methods to ensure the data are kept confidential. And finally, all this obviously will not have a great impact unless we develop and we systematize the standards and the tools into guidelines and promote the adoption of these best practices in countries through the provision of technical assistance. Finally, all these four pillars, as I was saying before, require an enabling environment in order to be able to be scaled up and have an impact. And here I want to point out just a couple of areas where we find it particularly important to increase investment, for the community to increase investment. One is investment in capabilities for remote technical assistance. As I was mentioning before, with the halting of face-to-face interviews and with travel restrictions and social distancing requirements, like in-person supervision, in-person training, have become particularly difficult. So therefore, together with other agencies, also we have been working in developing a set of tools for remote training. But this one it requires also investment in ICT infrastructure for countries, particularly developing countries, to be able to sustain and maintain this operation, this remote operation. And finally, one last point that I like to make in this slide, again, without taking away from the other point, is the need for more sustained financing for national survey, particularly for the creation of these global public goods which are generally we find it difficult to finance through country operation. And in this vein, it is in this vein that the World Bank, together with other international agencies and institutions and donors, we are working towards establishing a global data facility, which will be with the objective of supporting the creation of this stronger enabling environment, both at the national level and at the global level. Finally, as Francesca was mentioning, the Inter-Secretariat Working Group can help, or at least it's been set up to help in making all this possible through support in improving coordination, both again at the national level, at the global level, and how the Inter-Secretariat can serve as an intermediary between this national data needs and this work on innovation and new methods and tools. And finally, a big role for the Inter-Secretariat is to advocate for better standards, for better tools, but also for better financing. And as part of this agenda for the next decade, we hope that the Inter-Secretariat can provide this catalyst role together with all national and global stakeholders. So one thing that I just wanted to mention that so the Inter-Secretariat Working Group is a consortium of 11 agencies plus a country representation. So in a way, it's meant to represent different views and different priorities of different countries at different levels of development, so that we can all together further this agenda. I will stop there. Thank you, Francesca. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Gero. Very interesting presentation and great to hear about the work of the Inter-Secretariat Working Group. It's now my pleasure to introduce the second speaker. Our second speaker is Braulio Villegas, a survey design and analysis expert at the Costa Rica National Statistical Office. Braulio, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hello. Well, you say my name is Braulio Villegas, and I work for the National Institute of Statistics and Census of Costa Rica as survey design analysis expert. And I'm going to talk to you about the Integrated Household Survey System, which is a project currently developed by the National Institute of Statistics. This project aims to structure all the household surveys carried out by institution into a coordinated survey program, which meets the demand of information from national and international users, including the SDGs indicators. Also do an efficient use of the available resources, which nowadays are very limited. Ensure the quality of the statistical data, and in addition, also be able to adapt to future requirements. This project started in 2018, and we expect to implement it in 2024. And it was motivated by the need to improve the way surveys have been conducted in the past. Currently, the institution have 4 permanent surveys, which are the labor force survey, the life conditions survey, the income and expenditure survey, and the informal sector survey. And also several non-regular surveys, each designed to serve a specific object and conducted as independent project. have led that sometimes to an overlapping of the topics covered by the surveys, but also to non-homogeneous processes and less available resources to deal with the growing amount of information that the institution has faced in recent years. Also, in addition, this project has been created because the need for a methodological update on how the surveys are carried out on the topics that are being investigated. So this project comprises the following activities and expected products. First, a continuous process of identification of information requirements, which evolve, as we know, through the years. So we need to be up to date with the requirements of information from the users. Second, an evaluation of the current institutional situation, including aspects such as all the statistical production and possible gaps of information, the objective and design of the permanent and special surveys that currently the institution has in the field, the management of the sampling frame, the survey sampling design, and the data collection processes. Also, the evaluation of the international recommendation and experiences of other countries. Thematic and sampling design of the future permanent household surveys and the design of an integrated IT system. And with this work, some of the expected products are a long-term household survey program, which could adapt to meet requirements that may arise in the following years. An updated conceptual framework for the permanent statistical operation, a coordinated processes for the management of the sampling frame and sampling design, an IT system that integrates different programs to implement new technologies in the activities of the survey system. All these activities are framed in an institutional adaptation of the survey activities to standardized and integrated processes. With this, have been even more important because with the COVID-19 pandemic, the institution has had to adapt the activities of the household surveys and take advantage of the technologies to face the new circumstances. Some of the most significant changes have been the change from face-to-face to telephone interviews using contact information from previous wave of the surveys, the implementation of teleworking in most of the activities of the institution, the implementation of special models to capture information related with the pandemic and the impact of this in the central topic of the service, and the implication of logistic regression model in the weighting and estimation process to correct possible coverage and no response biases. The experiences of facing the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the importance of this project, especially the need of a more efficient use of resources, the ability to adapt to new circumstances, and the adaptation of new technologies in the processes of the service to enhance the statistical production. Nevertheless, we still face some challenges in the future. This project requires a transformation on how the institution works nowadays. Also, these changes require an important amount of financial resources because it implies several changes on how the institution works today. Also, the maintenance of this historical data series is a challenge because this project implies several methodological changes. And also the need of long-term planning and continuous updating through the implementation of the project. This takes several years, and the situation international and also national have changed So we have to keep an eye on all these changes and adapt the system and the service to the new situation, and think in the future when this project is implemented, to ensure that keep updated with the new technologies and new requirements of the users. So this was my presentation. So thank you. Continue.
Thank you so much, Braulio. Very, very, very interesting to hear about the great work done, and also, of course, the challenges and looking ahead, one needs to be prioritized. Let me now turn to our third speaker. Our third speaker today is Mr. Imam Mahdi, Deputy Chief Statistician of Methodology and Information at Statistics Indonesia. Mr. Mahdi, you have the floor. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, very well. Thank you. You can go ahead.
Do you see my slide?
Yeah, if you can go on presentation mode, that would be great. If you can just click on the presentation mode of the PowerPoint.
Yep. Can you see my presentation now?
Perfect. Now it looks great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So my name is Imam Mahdi. I am the Deputy Chief Statistician for Methodology and Statistical Information. I am from the Statistics Indonesia. So in this opportunity, I'm very pleased to share our experience, especially when we conduct these household surveys in the time of crisis, especially in the condition of pandemic of COVID-19. So I will introduce two cases. The first one is a household survey that's considerably quite complex, and the second one is the simpler one. So we put some handling for two surveys with different schemes. As you know that in the COVID-19 pandemic, there are some restrictions happening all over the world, including in Indonesia, that it introduced restrictions on the mobility of the people. Also, there are some restrictions on the social working, social life, and also the religious activities. And also it restricts the workplace also. And on the other hand, the government must, face this challenge, how the government will handle these situations. So in this case, the government will focus on the rearranging the government budgets. It prioritizes the budget for the handling the health for the people. And also it impacts our NSO that half of the budget are reduced. It also impact with our household survey. So regarding with the situation, so NSO must continue producing the statistical data. However, in these situations, we have to protect our staffs, enumerators, and respondents when they are conducting the statistical activities. And also we have to, continue producing the statistical data for the government. So, however, that this is not easy situations, and somehow that we have to modify our methodology, and we have to modify our business process so that we can cope with the situations. So in this methodology adjustment, we, introduce some questionnaire design. And also we adopt some statistical modeling for predicting some values. And in the business process, also we try to create some efficiency in the process, especially on the data collection, data processing, and the enumerator training. The first case I will introduce is about the National Socio-Economic Survey. In our language, we call SUSENAS for abbreviations, which is actually a household survey that produces SDGs and some socioeconomic indicators. As you see on the slides, there are 8 indicators that will contributed from the survey. It includes like Human Development Index, education, health, fertility, and birth control, housing, information technology, social welfare, and also poverty. And the survey, it is composed with 3 modules. So one question, there are some modules in the questionnaires. The first module, what we call household consumption, and the second one, education and social culture, and the third one is health and housing. So this household survey is considerably quite complex, since it has lots of variables, it has lots of questions, and it takes some time to fill out all those questionnaires. If you look at the characteristic of this survey, it has 3 modules, and overall it has more than 1,000 variables. It produces 18 indicators. So we hold like more than 20,000 enumerators to collect all the data all over the country, especially in the level of province and also the municipality. And the sample size is about more than 320,000 households all over Indonesia. It is conducted twice a year, and the overall enumeration time is about 1 month. By facing the pandemic situations, so we try to reduce the number of questions. In this case, we adopt some statistical modeling to predict some values on the consumption module. So that means there are 2 remaining modules only in the education and social culture, and the second module is about health and housing. By reducing one module by using the statistical modeling, that means we also reduce the number of variables. And also it will introduce shortening the interview time. And however, if you look at this one, in the pandemic situation, we still require the same number of the enumerators and the same sample size, and it is executed also twice a year. In this case, by modifying the methodology, we reduce the interview time. So before the pandemic, it requires like 2 hours face-to-face interview. In the pandemic, it requires only 1 hour face-to-face interview. But since the situation is quite delicate and it's quite difficult to, to see the respondents, so we extend the enumeration time to 1.5 months. So it creates some flexibility for the enumerators to see the respondent. That's the way we modify the methodology. And the second thing, we modify our business process. So in terms of the training, we use the online learning management system. So everything is online. Previously, we just use classical training in the class, but now we use online training system. And the thing is that quite difficult for them to have the question and answer because it's, it's lack of the interactivity. But we spend more time for more sessions for the question and answer. And also we provide the training materials in the system that all the enumerators can view and can review all the training materials at any time. So that's the pros of the situations. In the data collections, we equip all enumerators with the self-protection, like masks, face shield, and gloves. And also, we try to avoid the face-to-face interview by using what we call paper-assisted telephone interviewing, or PATI, that that still we use the paper base, but we try to interview the respondents by using the phone. How we can do this one? So the enumerator when they visit the locations, they have to contact the neighborhood head first. So by contact them, they can identify whether the respondents in good health, they are not contaminated with the COVID-19. And the second ones, they try to get the respondent phone numbers. If they can get the respondent phone numbers, then they can interview by using the phone. However, that the head of the neighborhood sometimes do not have a phone number or respondents. So there is no other way that the enumerators must visit the respondent and perform the face-to-face interview. In the data processing, also we have the center of data computations. So in this case, that all operators must use the self-protection like mask, face shield, and gloves. And also before they key in the questionnaires, the questionnaire must be sun-dried and disinfected first. Make sure that it is okay, there is no such contaminated from the COVID-19. So by having this one, we try to keep safe our operators for entering the data. And the second case I would like to introduce is about the horticulture potency survey, which is actually a smaller survey than the SUSENAS. It aims to estimate the horticulture productions by visiting the household, agriculture household. If you look at the characteristics, that it has only one questionnaire, and the variable is very limited, only about more than 30 variables. The indicator it produced only 9. And it has less time for the interview, and the number of respondents is quite the sample size quite big, 13,000 all over Indonesia, and it requires more than 350 enumerators. It is conducted at the quarterly survey and 1 month enumeration time for one survey. And in the methodology, there is no changing in this case, so we just keep it as it is because the survey is really small, variables are really small. And the thing is that in the enumerator training, we use the same thing like SUSENAS. We use the online system. So the difference is when we conduct the data collections. On the previous survey that I introduced, they use PETI, but in this case, we use KP. We adopt the computer-assisted personal interviewing for data collections. That means the enumerator must bring their own gadgets. And they have to follow the same rules, that they have to contact the neighborhood head to check the health condition of the respondents, also get the phone number. If they can get the phone number, they can interview by the phone number, but they entering the data using the KP. By using the KP, that means we avoid the contact from the in data processing, especially because when we use the gadgets, we fill out the value on the gadget and send directly to the data center. So that means no contact at all for these situations. So this is a different situation. The smaller survey that we have. So in summary, that we can also have a lesson learned from these situations, and also there are some challenge. The first challenge is the response rate. In the pandemic, the response rates in overall it drops from 95 to 100% to like 80 to 89%. This is for the SUSENAS. However, if you look at the smaller survey, like the agriculture survey, the response rates was about 60%, about 60%. It's quite low. And what we learned from here, that using this statistical modeling, it has the alternative to produce indicators that means we can reduce the effort to fill out the questionnaire, and also we reduce the time for the survey by simplifying the questionnaire. And also in this lesson that it is tried to optimize the data collection by using the multi-mode data collections. We have to look at the situation whether we can have the KW, KP, or KT, for example, in different situations. If the respondent is highly literate for the data collection, then can they use the KW, computer-assisted web interface? However, when they are not highly literate, then we have no choice that our enumerators must go to the respondents. And finally, the challenge is how we can improve the data literacy, because in the pandemic situation, we want that respondent can, fulfilling the questionnaire by themselves. If they can do self-enumeration, it's really great, but it takes time to improve their literacy. So this is the challenge and lesson learned as our summary in this talk. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Imam. If you could kindly mute yourself. Thank you. So our last speaker today is Mr. Steve Woodland. He's the head of social survey data collection operations at the UK Statistical Office, ONS. Steve, over to you.
I'm Steve Woodland, head of social survey operations at the Office for National Statistics. Today I'm going to talk about overcoming challenges to survey data collection during the pandemic and ONS's plans for the future for household data collection. First of all, just a bit about ourselves. The Office for National Statistics in the UK is the executive office of the UK Stats Authority. It is the National Statistical Institute for the UK and is an independent body directly accountable to Parliament. Our main responsibilities are collecting, analysing and disseminating statistics about the UK's economy, society and the population. Social survey operations is the largest division in ONS, with over 1,400 people, including those based in the office and our nationwide interviewer communities. We are responsible for many of the largest social surveys in the United Kingdom. Face-to-face interviewing was paused for all surveys on the 17th of March 2020. As the pandemic hit, our main aims were as follows. First of all, we had to protect our staff, in particular the field interviewers who were usually working within households doing face-to-face interviewing. We also had to make sure that we protected respondents. We had to mitigate against any risk of being virus spreaders. Thirdly, we had to continue our operations wherever possible, continuing to run our surveys in order to provide the information to inform both government and more generally society about the impact of the pandemic on key economic and social indicators. And finally, another task that we were set was to collect new data. There are a large number of requests that came in for new survey data collections, again to inform the public and to inform government about the impact of the virus on UK society. Data collection for all our surveys was moved exclusively to telephone data collection as a result. This involved setting up new processes and required the rolling out of new technology and hardware. We developed an online portal, which was a way of sample members providing us with their contact details, so it was effectively an opt-in process. We also developed later on what we called a knock to nudge, which is a process where interviewers, once we enabled them to be able to again work out in the field, would make a socially distanced visit to an address for the purpose of obtaining a telephone number only. Adaptations were also required to how we usually engage with respondents. For example, our letters had to change, the online content had to change. Our sample designs were modified. In most cases, we increased the size of our samples to adjust for the falling response rates. Questionnaires had to be adjusted, in most cases shortened, in order to make them fit for purpose for telephone collection. These changes were comprehensive and wide-ranging. Alongside the adaptations to our business as usual surveys, we also launched 2 new online surveys, one a labour market survey and the other an opinion survey. Both were already in the process of being developed, but that development timetable was escalated. The online labour market survey was also used as a sampling frame for the COVID infection survey, which was used to measure community prevalence rates of the virus. You can see from this chart the immediate impact of the pandemic on response rates to our largest survey, the labour force survey. Response dropped from 55% to 24% in the first instance, and then increased to about 30% once a number of the changes had been put in place. So, for example, the online portal, changes to incentives, and other changes were introduced. When we introduced some months later, after a considerable amount of testing, the knock-to-nudge process, which I talked about, response rates jumped up to around 40% and have been sitting at that level since. With our current approach, so the telematching, online portal, and knock-to-nudge, around 60% of cases end up with some form of contact information. Therefore, our current non-contact rate at the moment is around 40%. Depending on the source from which we get the contact details, the success of conducting an interview really varies. If we get the number via the portal or via the knock-to-nudge, the success rate is high, something around about 80%, compared to where we use the telematching, so where we're matching sample to publicly available lists of telephone numbers. The success rate is much lower, something like 35 to 40%. Knock-to-nudge has been the most effective at addressing issues of bias in the achieved samples. Early on, when we're just doing the telematching, and particularly the telematching or the online portal, it was noticeable that we were underrepresenting particularly rental households, larger households, households with younger persons, and households with people from a non-white ethnic background. Knock-to-nudge has been effective at adjusting for this, so we can target that knock-to-nudge where we think there's, the density of the areas is much higher with these types of people. We're still exploring the impact on bias, but from what we've seen so far, knock-to-nudge is likely to be part of whatever future approach we take to collecting data. With the easing of lockdown restrictions, we are now starting to test different approaches, including returning to in-home interviewing. In August, a trial involving about 30 interviewers will be run on 2 of our surveys. As part of the knock-to-nudge exercise, we'll be offering the option of conducting an in-home interview. We need to test both the doorstep protocol and the protocols for working in households. Interviews will only be done via return visit, so an appointment will have to be made, which will sacrifice some response, as we may, in the past, have tried to get the interview immediately. There'll be dynamic risk assessments will be conducted, so interviewers will be trained in that. And also we're going to have breaks within the interview to allow both the interviewer and the respondent to, if they change their mind or are uncomfortable about the interviewing, or there's some change in circumstance in the household, to be able to stop that interview at convenient places. The intention is to roll this approach out further to other surveys and more interviewers. This, of course, will depend on government guidelines. We're also looking at closely at respondent attitudes. Around 2 in 5 respondents to an online survey expressed reluctance to letting an interviewer into the household. This did not seem to vary as guidance and regulations were changing. We're going to be repeating this in July. If this represents a permanent change, this will have a big bearing on our delivery model, as it will significantly increase the costs of our field visits. So the big question that we've really got is this a permanent change in respondent attitudes? COVID has escalated the pace of development of online collection. In February, we ran a trial which was a sequential mixed mode design. Online first, followed by telephone capture, then a face-to-face follow-up. What we call the knock-to-nudge that I referred to earlier, to get a telephone number or encourage online completion. This achieved a 50% response rate, which was broadly the same as the response rates achieved pre-pandemic. We're currently looking at both the cost and quality of this data collection method, and this work will inform our future operational model. So in summary, there's a few points I'd like to make. I think we're going to have to deal with ongoing certainty. It is unlikely that there's going to be a smooth linear path back to working in the field and interviewing in homes. It is possible that there will be further outbreaks which might require national and regional lockdowns, and our operational model will need to be able to account for that and adjust for that. We know we won't be returning to a pre-pandemic delivery model of purely in-home interviewing. Response rates for that approach are likely to be significantly lower due to the reluctance of the public letting us into their households. We're going to have to continue to offer telephone as an alternative, and the knock to nudge is likely to stay. Online first, mixed mode will become more important. We are upping the pace at which we are delivering this capability for our surveys. Some of the more complex surveys that we previously thought were less suitable for online collection are being re-evaluated, and I expect that they too will be moved online. We'll continue to be more responsive to new data requirements. We've had to be very flexible over the last 16 months, starting up new surveys at much shorter notice than previously. Timeliness as a dimension of quality has become more important, at least relative to accuracy. We will accept lower response rates now in a way that we wouldn't have previously done. But this has also given rise to many more opportunities to innovate and to try things that we would have been previously reluctant to do. For example, asking respondents to provide us with their telephone contact details prior to a visit would not have been done before the pandemic, for fear that would have just encouraged refusals. Times have changed, and we're going to have to continue to evolve our data collection operations to cope with these unprecedented times. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And now we've completed the series of speakers today. We had 4 great presentations. And to conclude the session, after these excellent presentations, we'll hear from the discussant. The discussant for today's session is Professor Monica Pratesi. She's full professor of statistics at the University of Pisa. She's also the president-elect of the International Association of Survey Statisticians, the IASS. Professor Pratesi is also member of the board of ISTAT, the National Statistical Office of Italy. Monica, over to you.
Thank you. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see it? Can you?
We see this. Oh, yeah, okay, now it's coming.
Okay, now it's coming. Okay, so many thanks for having this chance of sharing my ideas after these important talks. And starting from the first one by Gero Carletto, World Bank, let me summarize what I have learned. So, first of all, the message is that surveys are here to stay. In a changing environment like this one, where big data and alternative data sources are very popular and common, surveys are here to stay. But they are evolving. So, to meet new information needs, I'm referring mainly to Sustainable Development Goals indicators, we need to develop new inference methods with the accent on non-probability sample selection, and maybe also with the focus on the integration methods of different data sources, and then a new way of making inference and judge the accuracy of this inference, counting on many different sources of different nature, probabilistic or non-probabilistic nature. So we need to study survey modes, and privacy issues are very relevant, and there is the problem of response rate that is declining. So evolution, but this evolution, as I learned from the talk by Braulio, is something that is coming together with coordination. So we need to synchronize various efforts by different actors, departments in the realm of official statistics or official data producers, to reduce conflicts between different data sources, trying to harmonize. In few words, we need coordination. And this coordination is necessary, otherwise we run the risk to have a chaos. And in this coordination, obviously, there is no room for the so-called silos logic. So each survey is separated from the other, each data source is separated from the others. And this is what we have learned also by the lesson by Imam Mahdi, because we need to adjust the business process using modern antiques, I could say, like computer-assisted paper interview, personal interviewing, telephone interviewing, or web interviewing for household surveys. But using these techniques, the surveys have been realized during the pandemic emergency in a more parsimonious setting, and maybe this is a lesson that we can maintain also for the next future. And again, it is important, the response rate and also techniques related to self-enumeration of respondents. And so different techniques can be used by different operators, different officers, and we run the risk that this can be considered like different ways of applying a general technology, and this technology that is the same can be declined in very different ways. And so, broadly speaking, online and mixed mode surveys are the future, and this is what I have grasped from the contributions by Steve Woodland. But again, the accent is on the respondents. Again, the accent is on the response rates. They are declining, and nudging, it's a tactic, I will say, that is important, and it contrasts with other ways to achieve compliance, such as education, legislation, or enforcement. So, at the end of the day, according to me, there are very big questions to answer. And the first is, okay, we have a system of registers and surveys. And what about putting together surveys, system of registers as mass statistics? And I'm going to say what I'm intending for mass statistics. So there are multiple data sources, and these multiple data sources open the door to the definition of multi-purpose sources and multi-source statistics. There are statistical domains, obviously. These statistical domains can be demography, a better focus on regional and local indicators, tourism, business, labor, transport, whatever you want. And for each of these statistical domains, we have data from different sources. So it is important to coordinate. But this is not something that we can do without taking into consideration that there are also smart statistics. So what we can also call citizen-generated data coming from mobile phones, remote sensing, smart meter data, or also web data. So according to my view, surveys are in evolution, and this in some sense is a sort of paradigm shift. There are differences in inputs, quality, operational conditions, processes, organization, regulation, and practices. And I would say that there is a sort of pre-digital world where surveys were traditional and the digital world that is now. So now we have inputs coming also from citizen-generated data and big data sources, and we have to revise the categories and dimensions of quality of the data. we are producing. Timeliness is very important. Maybe we have to reward the accuracy, because integrating different data sources, we need to better define what accuracy is, especially when these data are coming from a non-probability sample. There are different actors, so the silos logic is to be abandoned, but we must be aware that not only official statistics producers are acting in this field. There are other data players, and also citizens and final users can access data and survey results directly without the intermediation of official statistics. So altogether, this requires a very deep change, and in Europe we call it trusted smart statistics evolution. But the general trend is that to be credible, accurate, and trustworthy, citizens must be involved in the process of producing survey data. And this has been clear during the COVID experience. And I have learned that all over the world and also international organizations are studying how to take advantage of what we have learned from this COVID experience. But according to what I have understood, we need to rethink the role of the respondents, because the response rates are declining, and we need to rise the engagement of respondents. This is a necessity. At the same time, big data, citizen-generated data, smart statistics are a very profitable ocean of information, and this requires rethinking the relations between the citizens and the production of statistics, and maybe the official statisticians. And my final questions are related to this, and according to what we have learned from this COVID experience, times are mature for transforming the respondents into collaborators. I'm thinking to the self-enumeration practices, and also to the privacy issues related to the usage of citizen-generated data. So from respondents to co-producers, and surveys of the future, according to me, are going towards this direction. Okay, so that's all from my side, and I hope that there is time for a rejoinder.
Thank you so much, Monica. That was absolutely great. I think a lot of food for thought and very interesting points raised. I'd like to go back to the speakers, to the panelists, if they can have a quick reaction to what Monica raised. If you can do that in 30 seconds, because we're running out of time. But I'd like especially to hear your 30 seconds reflections on the way forward in the context, or the context that Monica has highlighted, especially looking at both the data producers, how the whole data ecosystem has changed, and the respondents being, you know, just the citizens being part of this production, not just as citizen-generated data or for big data, but also as they take a better and more active role in surveys. Gero, I'd like to start with you. Over.
Thanks, Francesca. Just a quick couple of points. 45 seconds. So one is, as Monica was saying, and as we have seen from many countries, from many country experience, so the crisis is turned into an opportunity. So in a way, there's been a lot of what Monica was referring as an evolution, and the speed of this evolution has been different across countries. So 2 points I would like to raise on this. One is, which was also highlighted in some of the presentation, the need to prioritize. We cannot do everything. So there is a need for greater prioritization and more targeted support. Two, second point related to this is the issue of equity. What we have seen also from the survey of NSOs that we conducted with UNSD, so they're like at risk of a widening gulf, a widening divide between richer and poorer countries in how they take advantage of these opportunities. And I think this is something to keep in mind as we move forward. So that's my first point. Second point is like ESA, which is also has been mentioned. It's like as we embark, as countries embark and scale up and adopt the use of new modes of data collection, like a phone survey, web survey, citizen-generated data. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that they come with their own limitations. So again, this is the need for greater investment in improving the methods, the tools, to make sure that the quality and the accuracy of these new sources meet the demand. Finally, the third point, which is also was mentioned by Monica, is like the need for achieving greater efficiencies through better coordination, better synchronization, as Monica said. And this is particularly important and more difficult now, where different crowds, different users and different producers are involved. Like it was already difficult to coordinate among data survey producers. Now you have the geospatial crowd, you have a lot of NGOs and other data producers collecting data through crowdsourcing. So this coordination becomes ever more important, but also ever more difficult. Thank you again, and back to you, Francesca.
Thank you, Gero. Braulio, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, just to complement the comments that the other panelists have said, I think that more important the coordination internally in this institution and the other producers of data, also the importance to the communication of the data and the use of the data. So I think that we have to also enhance the coordination with the users, and because we have seen that doesn't matter if you enhance the production of the data, but if the user of the general public doesn't see the importance and the impact of the society, probably at the end of the day, we don't get all the benefits we can obtain from the work we are doing. So I think that it's important to highlight the role of the users and the communication with them that the institutions or the producers of statistical data have. So thanks.
Thank you, Braulio. Imam, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to comment two things. The first one is related with the multi-mode data collections, and it is actually really great. It depends on the situation, of course. Like the Indonesia is this, really diverse situations. Like the IT infrastructure is not really available all over Indonesia, and that's why we can use the paper-based still, but we can combine with the telephone interviewing. And the second thing, if the telecommunication infrastructure is really available, then we can use KP. So that means in any situations in one country, we can use multi-mode data collection. And the second thing is that there is opportunity that we can use the other data sources for statistical modeling. If we can do this in terms of the big data analysis, then we can reduce the time for the survey itself. So this is one case that our survey used the modeling for the consumption predictions, and it helps a lot us to reduce the survey time. I think there's 2 comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam. And this concludes the session today. I think we had great presentations and fantastic inputs from Professor Pratesi. I think the Inter-Secretariat Working Group will really benefit from all the experiences shared today and the reflections. Especially, Monica was able to put everything in a great context, looking at the whole data ecosystem and thinking of the way forward, what roles the different actors and the different data actors will play. So I hope we'll have other opportunities to continue this dialogue. And thanks again, everybody, and everybody has a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Many thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So much for the time.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.